Alright, so I recently picked up the new 24-70 f2.8 G Master version 2, as you're now seeing me do a brief unboxing of this. But what I wanted to do while I had both the version 1 and the version 2 in my possession, side by side, was do a comparison video that shows the different specs and features, while also doing some test shots and different sample images just to see how these two stack up against one another. Now, if you want even more details on both of these lenses, I'm going to be doing a full in-depth review on both the version 1 and the version 2 in the coming weeks, where I will show a lot more different sample images that I've shot with both of these, but for now, let's just do a comparison to see how they stack up side by side. So here we have both the version 1 and the version 2, and just doing a quick look at their lens hoods, you will see that they actually look very similar, although the version 1 does tend to extend a little deeper on the sides. The other difference I do see with the version 2 hood is the fact that you do have this little catch here to adjust filters or anything that is on the front of the lens, which I haven't really seen in any other lens hood other than, I think, Sony 70-200s and some of their larger telephoto lenses. So setting the hoods aside, what you'll probably first notice here is the general size difference and also weight difference between the version 1 and the version 2. So while they're both roughly as wide as each other at around 3.5 inches or so, given that they both had the same filter thread size of 82 millimeters, what you're going to notice is that while the version 1 actually goes to around 5.35 inches tall at its largest, the version 2 only extends to 4 3/4 inches tall, so you have generally almost a little less than an inch's size difference between these two, and that might definitely make a difference in terms of whatever bag or case you're using to store these in if you do want to actually save a little bit of space. One thing I can also tell you, of course, picking these up is that there is definitely a weight difference. So the version 1 comes in at around 31.25 ounces, while the version 2 comes in at around 24.5 ounces. And that in and of itself is, I think, like an iPhone 13 Pro's weight in terms of a difference there. Something you're definitely going to notice in a prolonged shooting scenario if you have to hold this lens overall for a long duration of time. So I think the overall lens features are going to be another area where the version 1 and version 2 definitely show a bit of a difference. The version 1 is definitely more of a minimal lens when it comes to its feature set, and definitely something that has changed over time with Sony's G Masters in terms of adding more custom buttons and things like the aperture ring to them. You do have a lock switch here, which will allow you to lock the lens in its 24mm position, and then after that, of course, extend the barrel outward to the different focal lengths, anywhere from 24 to 70 millimeters. You then have, of course, the focus ring, which is focused by wire on these Sony lenses. Other than that, you do have one single custom button that you can program, and of course will be generally focus hold by default in most of the Sony cameras that you use it with. And then you do have a physical autofocus to manual focus switch that you can toggle on and off. So the GM1 is definitely a bit more of a minimal lens if that's something you prefer in terms of less buttons or features, but what I will say is the version 2 does offer some really nice upgrades from that allow you to customize the lens more, and some overall general features that are going to be a bit more conducive to any video shooters out there and their workflow. So interestingly enough, the GM2, even being a bit more compact, actually packs a lot more into its smaller body. So rather than one custom button on the version 1, you actually have two on the version 2, as you can see here. These two right here. You still have the main zoom ring, which allows you to go from 24 to 70 millimeters. Although one big difference here compared to the version 1 is that while you don't have a lock on this particular lens, you do have a smooth versus tight feature that allows you to control the friction or the amount of force it takes to move the zoom ring. So right now you can see this is on smooth, and in this case it's actually relatively easy to extend and contract the barrel of the lens. If I were to instead switch this to tight, what you're going to notice here is it definitely takes a bit more force to move the lens, and so this is not quite locked, but definitely will keep the zoom ring in a more fine-grained place than it would, say, if you had it on the smooth setting. So just to do a quick test to see how well each of these zoom rings on the lenses actually keep their focal length when, say, they're aiming down or you have a bit of shake going on. This is the version 1 at 50, and what you're going to see is that it is not extending any further, even in shaking it, so definitely a lens you can trust to stay in place. Now with the version 2, what you will see is that when you do shake the lens, and it is on the smooth setting, there is some movement with the lens barrel here compared to, say, on the version 1. So you'll notice an ever so slight movement starting at 50 compared to where it is now. That said, if I were to switch this to the tight setting, what you're going to now see is keeping this at 50 again and trying the same test. What you're going to see is that there is going to be no movement here, so pretty much the same amount of control and consistency in terms of keeping its focal length. Of course, a couple of other big features to point out with the version 2 is the fact that you now have an aperture ring on this lens, whereas you did not before. So this goes anywhere from f2.8 to f22, or can just be put in the automatic position so that you can control aperture on your camera. So as you can hear now, this is currently in the clickable position, but there is a setting on the lens to be able to change this to become declickable. So if we turn the click off, what you will now see is that this lens smoothly goes across the different aperture values. Still does lock into place in the automatic setting, so you definitely have a good amount of control there with the aperture ring. And this is nice to see Sony's added over time, but because a lot of their initial lenses with the aperture ring did not have the ability to lock it, it was often pretty easy to accidentally bump this or change it if you were trying to change maybe a zoom lens's focal length or trying to manually focus. Now you do actually have an iris lock switch, so if you flip that on, you will see the aperture ring does not move, and so you can accidentally bump this and throw off your aperture, as you might have been able to do in some of the other Sony lenses that have the aperture ring and don't have the ability to lock it. Another area where these two lenses do vary is in terms of minimum focusing distance. In this case, the version 2 being a little over 8 inches at the 24mm range and just a little under 12 inches at the 70mm range, which is itself a noticeable difference compared to the version 1, which has a minimum focusing distance across the board of 1.24 feet, meaning at varying focal lengths you're going to have anywhere from 3 to 7 inches of difference in terms of how close you can get to your subject. Now again, as I mentioned before, both of these do have an 82mm front filter thread, so going to take the same size filters and are both kind of at the larger or largest end you're likely to find with many of these photography-based type lenses. And yes, both of these lenses come with the standard Sony G Master soft bag, the lens hoods as you saw before, and the typical Sony caps. So let's run through some sample shots and images now with both of these lenses. Definitely let me know what you think in terms of if you notice a difference in terms of sharpness or the overall image quality between the two. So overall, the GM version 2 really does look nice. I would say optically, I was never unimpressed with the version 1, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this fares in terms of shooting with it in the long run. Again, definitely feel free to subscribe if you want a more in-depth review of each of these lenses. They are coming up soon. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. For now, that is all I have to say, so thanks for watching.